All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. I hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Playoff coverage here at Hoops Tonight is brought to you by Chase Freedom Unlimited. How do you cash back? We are going to take a break from the playoffs today to talk a little bit about the Golden State Warriors who are heading into a pivotal offseason, in my opinion. Now, I tend to agree with Draymond Green. I do not think that the dynasty is over. It can't be over when you have as many good players as the Warriors have, when you have the assets that they have to potentially improve the roster, a guy like Steve Kerr coaching things, and a bona fide top-tier superstar, the likes of Steph Curry. You beat them this year, but they're going to be right back in the mix next year because of those pieces. That said, they do need to make some improvements. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about some of the, just kind of take a look back at what this season was like, not just in the grand scheme of things, but also for the individual players. And then I actually have 5 trades that are potential options for the Warriors, some more realistic ones, some more long shot ones to improve their roster significantly and raise their ceiling heading into next season. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And last but not least, if for whatever reason you guys miss one of these videos and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, don't forget you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. All right, let's talk some basketball. So, I didn't find this season to be as much of a disaster as a lot of people think it was. It's super normal to have defending champions deal with malaise over the course of a season. They're going to be the least motivated group. That's just human nature. They're at the mountaintop, so to speak, right? Also, like, even though I think it's important to acknowledge that the Draymond Green punch did play a role, like, I think there's been enough intel, and forget about intel. Steve Kerr just straight up came out and said it in the a press conference yesterday, but there's no doubt that the Draymond Green punch of Jordan Poole negatively affected things. But the core problem there is less about one single punch, which definitely exacerbated things, but more about just the dynamic going on in that locker room. You have a lot of young players who have a vision for what their career should be like that they've probably been imagining since they were very young. And then you've got this other faction, this established faction, this older faction in the locker room that only cares about one thing, and that's winning NBA championships. So much so that any of those players would make significant sacrifices to their own game to be willing to do so. Just like Steph Curry came off the bench last year to start the first round of the NBA playoffs against the Denver Nuggets. Like Draymond Green came off the bench during, I believe, the Sacramento Kings series, right? So, like, these guys are in a different phase of their career. Like Jordan Poole's playoff minutes got cut significantly. He went from averaging like 28 minutes a game last year to like 22 minutes per game and was on a much shorter leash and got pulled more frequently when he made mistakes. Like, even understanding the realities of why as it pertains to the ultimate goal that the Warriors were pursuing, that's really hard for a 23-year-old to deal with. You know, Jonathan Kuminga, like going from being a guy that was pretty regularly used in the tail end of the season, kind of as like an athletic big for them, was completely out of the rotation. Like, do you think that's how he envisioned his NBA career progressing? That's got to be frustrating for him. And then even Moses Moody, who was the one young guy that we predicted before the season would be useful in the playoffs, who ended up being the one guy Steve Kerr trusted, even with him, like, I bet deep down, even though he enjoys his role, I'm sure if you asked him, he'd be like, yeah, I'd like to have more opportunity to demonstrate what I can do. I've heard a lot about the amount of work the Warriors have been putting in with him with his pull-up jump shooting and all these different offensive skill set things, and he doesn't really get a chance to demonstrate those things in this tiny role, right? So the reality is like, regardless of what punch Draymond Green threw, there's just a troubling dynamic that is brought on by the two timelines thing. And they were able to overcome that 2 years ago. They were not able to overcome that this year. But, you know, that was unavoidable. The malaise, that's normal from a championship, a defending champion type of roster. I thought you specifically saw that on the road. Don't be surprised if the age differential between the established veteran guys and all the young guys led to chemistry issues that probably played a big role in them just not gelling as well when they were on the road. I think all those things are related. But then again, like, your best player, Steph Curry, missed 2 significant chunks of games. Andrew Wiggins missed a lot of time this season. So you're down your 2 best players for a lot of time too. And despite of all of that, they still locked in when they needed to, won 8 of their last 10 regular season games, avoided the play-in, got to the 6th seed, beat the 3 seed, winning back-to-back road games in Game 5 and Game 7 against Sacramento. And then they ran into the Lakers. And look, here's the deal. I thought the Lakers were better than any Western Conference team that the Warriors played last year. Are they better than the Celtics? Who knows? And we might even get to find out if they meet in the finals. But they're a hell of a lot closer to the Celtics than they were to that Dallas Mavericks team that was tiny, and that Memphis Grizzlies team that was huge but super young and inexperienced and didn't know how to win basketball games at that level, and the Denver Nuggets without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. Like, I just think that Laker team was better. So it's really easy to look back there and be like, hey, they lost in the second round, and they looked kind of feeble at times during that Laker matchup. But it's like, that's just what happens sometimes when you face a tougher road in the playoffs. And that's a great example of the direction the league is heading and the fact that you do need to bolster the roster with talent. You clearly had enough the year before. You clearly did not this year. And when I look at how big the Lakers are, and when I look at how big this Nuggets team is, which has given the Warriors some issues even in the past without all of their guys, I do think that the Warriors do need to despite the fact that this season has not been as much of a disappointment as I think a lot of people have portrayed it as, there's no question that they need to make some improvements to the roster. But I don't think they're that far off. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to give a quick season recap for the core players on the roster, and then a plan for the offseason with some options. Like I said, I have 5 potential trades for the Warriors to improve their roster in a little bit. All right, let's start with Steph Curry. So he averaged 29, 6, and 6 this year. That's his third highest scoring season of his career. 66% true shooting. That's his third most efficient scoring season of his career. Didn't have his best playoff series against LA, but a lot of that is Anthony Davis being the best defensive player in the world, the Lakers, in my opinion, being the best defensive team in this field, and Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole both fell apart over the course of the series, which put a ton on Steph Curry, which allowed the Lakers to throw the kitchen sink at him, and it led to his least efficient series since the 2019 second round against the Rockets. But in my opinion, there's no question that Steph Curry is still a bona fide top-tier superstar if he's not the best player in the world. Draymond Green, 9, 7, and 7 this year, his highest scoring season in 5 years. 59% true shooting is the most efficient scoring season of his career. And he made an all-defense team, which matched with what I saw on tape all year. I thought he was every bit as good defensively as he's ever been. Had a lot of big defensive moments in the playoffs, was amazing against Sacramento, had several good games against the Lakers. Yes, he has offensive limitations, but people have been talking about that for years, and they've won 4 championships. They were talking about that last year, and they won the championship. To me, with Draymond Green, it works. You just have to have the right amount of aggregate offensive skill around him. And as the Warriors role players, specifically Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson, fell apart, that was when it became a problem to where Draymond Green's offensive limitations could rise to the surface a little bit. But that, to me, is we've known that ever since 2015. Draymond needs to be surrounded with a lot of offensive talent for his abilities to float to the surface. Draymond knows that. They all know that. And so I don't think anyone is blaming Draymond Green for what happened in this postseason run. So Steve Kerr, specifically in his press conference yesterday, said that he doesn't think the Warriors are a title contender if Draymond Green is not on the team. I 1,000% agree with him. To me, it is just a reality of NBA history. I've done this bit before, but go back through the NBA champions and look at their defensive front courts. 2022, the Golden State Warriors, Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins in the front court. 2021, the Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez in the front court. Los Angeles Lakers in 2020, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. 2019, Ibaka, Gasol, and Kawhi Leonard in the front court defensively. 2018, Warriors, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green. 2017, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green. 2016, LeBron James and Tristan Thompson, right? Going to 2015, Draymond Green again with Andre Iguodala and Harrison Barnes, right? Going back, like every year we go back. Kawhi Leonard and Tim Duncan in 2014, LeBron James and Chris Bosh in 2013, LeBron James and Chris Bosh in 2012. 2011 is probably your weakest defensive front court in that group with Dirk Nowitzki at the power forward. But Tyson Chandler was one of the best rim protectors in the league that year and made the all-defense team. Going back before that, Gasol Bynum, Kevin freaking Garnett. You guys get the point. I'm not going to go any further back, but every single NBA champion in the modern NBA has had not just a good defensive front court, but a great defensive front court. Specifically, a great defensive front court that has versatility, right? And so if you give up Draymond Green and go, all we need is just another random replacement big to fill his position, and you go from Draymond Green in the front court to Andrew Wiggins and some random center in the front court, you are not a championship contender anymore. Steve Kerr is not just saying that because he likes Draymond Green. He's saying that based on a trend in NBA history. You do not win in the NBA playoffs unless you have that type of front court. For instance, Denver with this Nuggets team that is favored to win in the Western Conference Finals is up 1-0 on the Lakers. They got absolutely sliced and diced by the Lakers. Did you see the difference in game one in the quality of shot the Lakers were able to get compared to what they got against the Warriors? Now, here's the thing. Denver can win, and maybe they will, but it would be unprecedented in NBA history to have a defensive front court of Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic win the championship. I should say unprecedented in modern NBA history, right? So again, I agree with Steve Kerr. The improvements need to be made elsewhere. Steph, completely untouchable. Draymond Green, completely untouchable. Because you cannot win unless you have a bona fide top-tier superstar, and you cannot win unless you have an elite top-tier defensive front court. Those two guys are your foundational pieces there. So getting rid of Draymond, I think, has to be completely off the table. Or you're heading into a rebuild. Get rid of Draymond, head into a rebuild. Unless you think there is some top-tier defensive player that you can add into that position. Klay Thompson, 22 points per game. That's the third highest scoring season of his career. 58% true shooting. That's the fifth most efficient scoring season of his career. He did cool off big time in the postseason. 18.5 points per game, 52.5 true shooting percentage. That's his least efficient postseason since 2017. To me, that's the big adjustment that Klay Thompson needs to make, is in his usage, particularly as they get to the NBA playoffs. And it's kind of unfortunate because Klay Thompson had a underrated half-court shot creation season. I've talked about this before, but 1.03 points per possession in pick and roll. That's the 69th percentile for players' his volume. In isolation, 1.13 points per possession. That's 86th percentile for the amount of volume that he was using. So during the regular season, he was a big part of why they were successful when Steph Curry got injured those two times. Klay Thompson was able to create shots in the half court in the regular season. But it's clear that as they get to the playoffs and the intensity picks up and the physicality picks up, he's just not getting enough lift on those shots anymore to knock those down. Doesn't mean he can't be a useful player. It just means he needs to change his role a little bit. Some of that usage that's going to Klay Thompson needs to be diverted to better, more athletic players when they get to the postseason. So to me, it's more of a role change for Klay Thompson. Steve Kerr also talked in his press conference yesterday about his offseason prep. And he's right. Like Klay Thompson has to, I know he's been dealing with injuries, and there's no doubt that he needs to take time over the summer to recover, but it is important for him to come into camp ready to go in a way that he wasn't in this last season. Like I said, still think he can be a super impactful player, just need to kind of change his role a little bit. Jordan Poole, career high 20.4 points per game and a career high 4.5 assists. His efficiency did go down a bit, but his turnovers went up a bit, but he had a nightmare playoff run. 17 points per game in the 2022 playoff run when they won the title, 10 points per game in this postseason run. 28 minutes per game last year, 22 minutes per game this year. 65% true shooting last year from Jordan Poole in the playoffs, 45% true shooting in this year in the playoffs. He had 6 20-point playoff games last year through 2 rounds. He had just 2 this year. Now, has Jordan Poole gotten worse at basketball? No. This is just what happens with young guards. They're inconsistent, and they're susceptible to matchup issues. They're not as experienced. They're not as adaptable, right? The other thing, too, is when young guards are struggling with their offensive game, they're not good at impacting the game in other ways, right? I think he's the player that the Warriors have to consider moving on from, but we're going to get to that when we start talking about trades. Andrew Wiggins basically gave you exactly what he gave you last year, statistically, both in the postseason and in the regular season. I thought he was every bit as good defensively. He just ran into a better player. I'm sorry, but this version of LeBron James is just a better basketball player than Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum from last year. And LeBron whooped his ass in Game 6 and whooped his ass during the pivotal stretches of the series when they needed him to. That's just LeBron. That's not on Andrew Wiggins. It doesn't matter. Andre Iguodala is the best defender I've ever seen guard LeBron James. But, down the stretch of game 5, 6, and 7 of the 2016 finals, Andre Iguodala couldn't do anything with him. So, that's just kind of the way it goes. Kevon Looney was every bit as good as he's ever been. He completely outplayed Domantas Sabonis in the first round. I'm just convinced at this point that anytime Kevon Looney matches up with a center that's not a top-tier guy, that he's going to win that matchup. And so I think he's somebody you have to hang on to as well. All the young guys down the roster we're going to get to in this next segment. Angi's list is now Angi, your home for everything home. Angi doesn't just get your home projects done, Angi gets them done well. With 20 plus years of experience combined with new tools to simplify the process, Angi makes completing home projects easy. With over 220,000 pros in their network, Angi makes it easy to research, compare, and hire pros to get the job done well. The pros in the network are locally based, and they've been rated and reviewed by others in your area who have actually used their services. You all know what it's like to own a home. You walk around, like I walk into the kitchen the other day, and my refrigerator is just making this horrible grinding noise. Or on Saturday, we were having a pool party. I had to use a couple outlets that I hadn't used in a while, and I found 3 or 4 outlets around the house that just didn't work. And that's super annoying. But the best part about Angi is it's a great tool to help you find the best available deal to get that work done and to get it done right. In just a few taps in the Angi app or clicks on the site, you can have Angi tackle your home service project from start to finish. Download the free Angi mobile app today or visit Angi.com. That's ANGI.com. All right, so let's take a look at this offseason. So I think you keep the starting lineup, right? Steph, Klay, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Kevon Looney. Not necessarily that lineup, but you keep all 5 of those guys. I think you can probably re-sign Draymond on some sort of team-friendly deal, something around $20 million a year, right? Gary Payton II is locked up at a good number, so he should be back. He's a super useful player. Jonathan Kuminga is on a team option that they'll pick up. Donte DiVincenzo is a player option that I would imagine he'll opt out of and become a free agent. But he did say he wants to stay in Golden State, so maybe you can get Steph on the phone with him and just try to apply a little friendly peer pressure and try to get him to pick up that team that player option. I think he's a useful player. I think he's a good point of attack defender. I think he's a great rebounder. I think he's enough of an offensive threat not to hurt you. Totally useful bench player in the NBA playoffs. Jordan Poole's extension kicks in, so we'll get to that in a minute. Moses Moody is a team option that'll get picked up. He's the only player under 23 that Kerr trusted in the playoffs, which is something we predicted before the season. And then PBJ and Ryan Rollins are both locked up on cheap deals. So basically, the key group of rotation players that should be back are Steph, Klay, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Kevon Looney, Gary Payton, Moses Moody. That's 7 guys. So the question is, what do you do with Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga? As I look at the core 7 guys that I just said, I see a lot of opportunities for improvement. I think they still need a backup guard that can defend at the point of attack. So that means you either need to get Donte DiVincenzo back or you need to find somebody in the veteran minimum market that can just, again, not be necessarily a big rotation piece in the playoffs, maybe not in the playoffs at all, but just somebody over the course of the regular season that could take point of attack assignments and just be a useful guard over the course of 82. I'd be looking at guys like Patrick Beverley or Austin Rivers. They're out there. You can even get young guys like the Lakers got Troy Brown Jr. last year, 6'5" guard that can defend guards. Again, super flawed players at veteran minimums. There are going to be nights where you want to pull your hair out watching those guys, but these are just the limitations that the Warriors have in their roster building. That's the kind of guy that they'll have to target there. I also think they need athletic size. Some kind of forward center who is playable offensively, but can help them in contested rebound situations and with rim protection. I don't care as much about a backup center necessarily. That's why I say athletic size, because one, Steve Kerr tends to not play centers that are flawed and can be played off the floor. And aggregate size is what matters at the end of the day. So like having the actual lineup groupings be big and tall and long and athletic actually matters more than just having one specific rim protector in that position. We're going to talk more about athletic size in a minute because I think you can address both of these issues in the same type of trade. They also need diversity of shot creation. Way too much on the guards right now in their offense to generate everything. They need some kind of rim pressuring forward. Basically a bigger, better version of Andrew Wiggins, or for Andrew Wiggins to make some sort of improvement. But at this phase of in his career, it's not realistic. So in my opinion, as you look at the reality of their cap sheet, the best pathway to address these issues is in the trade market. The most realistic trade pieces are Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga. Jordan Poole's a little bit redundant with Steph Curry, and he's not good enough defensively to consistently play alongside Steph Curry. So he's basically a sixth man. And that's a lot of money to pay a sixth man. That's a poor use of resources, in my opinion. Jonathan Kuminga is awesome, or I should say he's going to be awesome, but not for a while. And there's a reason why Steve Kerr doesn't play him. He doesn't trust him in those settings, and there's a lot of evidence in NBA history that young players don't impact winning at this level. But he also probably has a great deal of value around the league. Same with Jordan Poole. And so that's the advantage here is those are two guys that make a decent amount of salary for you to be able to bring something back. But both of them have enough value on their own that you shouldn't have to attach too much draft compensation to them in deals. There are going to be a lot of teams that are super impressed by Jonathan Kuminga's athleticism and shooting ability and what he can do defensively at the point of attack and find that super interesting. There are going to be a lot of teams out there that are on a different timeline, like younger, more looking towards the future, who are going to see Jordan Poole as like a really interesting foundational guard for them and want to see what he looks like in a high usage on ball role, especially considering the fact that Jordan Poole has literally had successful playoff runs in the past. A 65% true shooting, 17-point per game performance, pursuing an NBA championship. That's really impressive. I think that's a big part of why the Warriors might be hesitant to get rid of him and why he might be back on the roster next year. But I would go in a different direction. So if Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga represent $35 million in tradable salary, you have some available first-round draft picks to trade, you have the ability to bring back some good NBA players. So ideally, what I would do is I'd look to move Kevon Looney to the bench and try to find some kind of forward that you can slot between Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green. So here are some examples. Again, and some of these are long shots and some of these are more realistic, but I have 5 potential trades for the Warriors to find that forward that you can slot between Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins. So what if you call up the Toronto Raptors? Gary Trent Jr. picks up his player option, which I think he probably will. I don't think he has a chance to earn as much in the open market as he can get just by picking up that player option. So him and OG Anunoby combined to make about $37 million. Now, I'm not sure when the new CBA rules kick in, so they might have to throw in an additional minimum salary to like someone like PBJ or Ryan Rollins to bump them over, because I don't think you're allowed to take back more salary under the new rules. But I don't know if the new rules take effect next year or the year after, so I'm not 100% certain about the tiny machinations. But essentially, it would be right after the league year changes and Jordan Poole's new contract kicks in. You'd offer Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga for OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. So OG Anunoby is that perfect defensive forward that you slot between Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins. He averaged 17 points per game on 59% true shooting this year. He shot 41% on catch and shoot jump shots this year. He has some inconsistencies in his offense and he can struggle a little bit creating shots in the half court, but maybe you can have some success in skill development with him, and he's going to get amazing matchups playing alongside Steph Curry in that offense. But essentially what you're doing is you're taking a guy who was out of the rotation entirely in Jonathan Kuminga and a semi-useful player in Jordan Poole, replacing Jordan Poole with Gary Trent Jr., who's just as useful at this phase of his career in a playoff rotation as a backup guard who can shoot off the dribble, seamless fit in the Warrior offense, who actually is a much better defensive player and rebounder than Jordan Poole. Basically a version of Jordan Poole that fits your timeline. And you're turning Jonathan Kuminga into OG Anunoby, a fantastic forward that definitely raises your defensive ceiling, gives you a little bit of someone that can attack mismatches down low in the post. It just makes you better, way, way better overnight, in my opinion. And I actually think you could probably get away with doing that deal without draft compensation either, because Jordan Poole's a real guard and the Raptors need a real guard. And if the Raptors decide to rebuild and decide that this timeline isn't working, Jonathan Kuminga is a super interesting athletic forward that might fit their timeline better. There's also a version of that deal that you can just call and basically ask for Pascal Siakam. And again, you get a little bit thin at guard, but Pascal Siakam is a much better offensive player than OG Anunoby, and also is a different type of big, lanky forward that you can slot between between Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green. So 2 versions of that Raptors trade. Another one I like, calling up the Washington Wizards at the trade deadline. So again, you'd have to run through half the season with the existing players. which could be a little bit dramatic, as we know. But I expect Kyle Kuzma to sign this summer, probably somewhere around $25 million per year, right? Like, we'll see when the time comes. But usually, when you sign a deal over the summer, you're not allowed to be traded until I can't remember the exact date, but it's like after some date in December or after some date in January where they become trade eligible, right? So essentially what you'd be doing is you'd be offering Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga for Kyle Kuzma and Daniel Gafford. That gives you Kyle Kuzma. I covered him when he was with the Lakers. I think he's perfect. He's a very good help defender, solid point of attack defender, has a lot of offensive punch and has gotten a lot more consistent offensively since he went to the Wizards. And he just knows how to play a role on a championship team because he's done so with the Lakers in the past. And he's just huge and can help a lot in contested rebound situations. I think he's perfect. I think he'd be absolutely perfect in that spot. And then Daniel Gafford just gives you another athlete off the bench. What if you call, this is another small trade, something that's a little bit more on the margins. What if you call the Utah Jazz and you offer Gary Payton II, PBJ, and Ryan Rollins with a little bit of draft compensation for Kelly Olynyk? And you have a shooting big that gives you the opportunity to play more lineups that give Steph Curry space. Steph Curry looked at his best in this playoff run when he had space to operate. And he's still one of the best dribble drive guards in the league and can pick defenses apart in high pick and roll and in isolation just as well as he can in all of his dribble handoff and off-screen stuff that they run. Kelly Olynyk is that shooting big, kind of like what Nemanja Bjelica did 2 years ago, but just a much better version of that, in my opinion. All right, here's a really aggressive example. And it's a long shot, but I think it's worth a call. What if you called the Utah Jazz and you offered Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga and multiple first-round picks, you probably would need 2, for Lauri Markkanen and Collin Sexton? Now, super long shot. Danny Ainge probably views Lauri Markkanen as untouchable and as a foundational piece, but hear me out. Here's the case. You are rescuing Utah from that ridiculous Collin Sexton contract. Collin Sexton then for the Warriors becomes basically that point of attack guard off the bench with some offensive punch that I was talking about earlier. But you're also giving the Jazz a real foundational guard core. So they started the year with Jordan Clarkson and Mike Conley, and those are 2 really solid NBA players. But you don't want those guys as your foundational guards if you're trying to win an NBA championship. So they traded Mike Conley, right? And they ended up shutting down Jordan Clarkson towards the end of the season. You get some interesting stuff out of Talen Horton-Tucker. He starts to show some flashes, but he can't be your dominant on-ball guard. I think he's better as a 2 guard, as like a second side action guy who can take primary point of attack defensive assignments. Jordan Poole is actually kind of a really smart, interesting guard to place next to Talen Horton-Tucker. Much better offensive player than Talen. A guy that very well might end up being an all-star one day if you give him real usage, and you don't have to give him primary point of attack assignments because you can give them to Talen Horton-Tucker. So I think that Jordan Poole might be a really interesting guard for the Jazz to take a look at, and then it's a timeline thing. Lauri Markkanen was an all-star. He's incredible, but he's 25, and I don't think he obviously can be the best player on a championship team, right? So the case for Utah is timeline. Instead of having a 25, 26-year-old guy who's been dealing with a lot of injuries over the course of his career, you go young, and you, like, the older guy you're testing out is Jordan Poole, but you've got all these young players, right? You've got Jordan Poole, Talen Horton-Tucker, Jonathan Kuminga. I'm blanking on the name of the young center, Walker Kessler, the young center on the roster. Just go all in on youth. And see, like Agbaji is actually a super interesting forward on that roster as well. You go all in on youth. So that's basically the case, right? Ainge wants a real guard that can fit his timeline. Super interesting young prospect forward, draft compensation, all in on the young timeline. Selling high on Lauri Markkanen, right? That's the way you look at it. Lauri Markkanen's value is probably never going to be as high as it is in that specific situation. Again, long shot, but I think it's worth a call. So that's just 5 examples, but those are ways to add real forward depth that give them athletic size to improve a specific weakness that they had, go all in on this particular timeline, and raise the ceiling around Steph Curry. Bottom line is the Warriors are not that far off, in my opinion. They just need to get better in a couple of key areas, and the 2 timelines thing, you cannot afford to hold on to assets that you're not using anymore. You got away with it in 2022. Can't get away with it anymore. It's time to cash in those assets and go all in on this timeline. All right, guys. that is all I have for today. We'll be covering the Warriors plenty over the course of the offseason, but that's a good primer to get you started here in the middle of May. All right, I will see you guys later tonight as we break down the conference finals.